cased book is one in which the cover, the case, is made separate to the book, and the two are brought together in a process called casing in. To understand the cased book, we have to understand the alternative and go back in time 200 years. The alternative is to attach the boards to the text block and then cover the book. Generally, all books prior to about 1820 were bound this way. It could be laced in cords, laced in tapes or strips of vellum or leather, or split board attachment. An understanding of the cased book is to understand the most common book structure produced over the last 200 years, including modern mass-produced books. Even if your interest is not in binding new books, but learning book restoration, it is essential to understand the cased book, as it is the book you will most likely come across. So why is the period about 1820 so special? The Industrial Revolution ran from roughly 1760 to about 1840 and changed manufacturing forever. Prior to this period, trades usually made products as small cottage industries. Often bookbinding was a multi-generational affair attached to the home. But the Industrial Revolution not only changed how things were made, but it changed society too. It saw the rise of the middle class and a general sustained increase in the standard of living, and with this, education. This drove the demand for books as people sought to become more educated and maybe wanted to demonstrate this by owning books. In the UK, the Parliament passed the Public Libraries Act of 1850, which enabled local boroughs to establish free public libraries, further driving the demand for books in the UK. While the demand side was on the rise, the supply side trades like printing saw a dramatic increase in the ability to print books, and the invention of wood pulp paper around 1820 and book cloth, also about 1820, saw a dramatic reduction in the cost and increase in availability of materials needed in the production of books. Prior to this, paper was made from rag pulp, and this fibre was becoming a limiting factor in production, and books were covered in leather, unless it was a temporary paper cover. In this period, a lot of pressure was put on bookbinders, as they were the last step in the manufacturing chain. At this time, all steps in the binding of a book were sequential. Books were sewn, boards attached, the book was covered. How could this process be sped up? Someone came up with the idea of making the cover and the text block separately and at the same time, in parallel, and then bringing the two together. This is how the cased book was born. Bernard Middleton wrote, "The invention of casing was of even greater importance, for it made a vast difference to production methods and greatly relieved the strain on the trade's manpower resources. Exactly when books were first cased has not been determined, but is generally thought to have been shortly after the introduction of cloth, almost certainly sometime between 1825 and 1830. Another benefit of the cased construction is that the case can be gold blocked using a large blocking press. This led to the elaborate and beautiful gold-covered books of the late Victorian period. You may hear this type of book be described as a cased book or a cased-in book, and be corrected for calling a book produced this way as a case binding. Not long ago, this was the accepted terminology. Eric Burdett wrote, "A distinction is drawn between books that have boards attached before covering and those that have not. The later are correctly known as cased books, since the book and cover come together only in the final stages. When the knowledgeable bookman speaks of a binding, he is referring to the former, in which the book and cover are an integrated whole." Just as Burdett's gendered language is outdated, so is the attitude towards case bindings. But there is an interesting point that is good to understand. I'll use the Bradall binding As an example, in one of Peter Verheyen's articles, he describes it as the German case binding. However, there are a number of important references to the same binding being constructed in boards. In Peter's article, he is describing both the process of construction and the finished product. The finished product is essentially identical, just the process of construction that is different. As always in bookbinding, there is significant variation across the schools and traditions, but the major steps in making a case binding, as I was taught and with minor modifications by me, is demonstrated in my video series on the case binding. I cover folding and collating of the sections, the sewing of the sections on supports, attaching end papers and trimming the edges, rounding, backing and spine lining, making the case, and casing in. There are many variations in the construction methods and covering styles. Some of these include a square back for a non-rounded book, quarter bound with a strip of material on the spine, half bound with corners or a 4-edge strip, and full bound. There can be a flush joint or a pronounced groove, often known as a French groove. The design of the cover of a cased book is only limited by your creativity. The cased book does have an Achilles heel, the attachment between the text and the case. It is common for cased bindings to fail at the inner joint. Understanding how these books are constructed helps in designing books to minimize this weakness. This can be done through guarding with cloth of the end papers, especially the paste down, sewn on end papers, or using more sewing supports. The cased, rounded and backed book is an excellent early project in your bookbinding journey. It covers many of the foundation skills and is open to many creative possibilities while being extremely practical and functional. I hope you've enjoyed this introduction to the cased book, and as always, I really appreciate you hitting the big thumbs up button. If you want to be notified of my future videos, please hit the subscribe button. And until next time, cheerio.